want to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself. But first, I read in your book that you said the best way to evoke connection and conversation is to just come up with questions on the fly. So if you were in my spot, what would you ask yourself?
Ooh, that is a good question. I mean, right, that, really, let's get meta. It's a good way to start. Well, I also wrote in the book that one of my favorite questions when I was a journalist, and still am, is asking people, why you? Why did you do this thing that is of interest in some way or is changing things in some way? Why did you do it and not someone else? And that, I think, brings up some really fun stories in people.
Absolutely. So why did you write this book?
Walked right into that one. So this is, for me, a question of reflection whenever someone gets this question. And so I give a different answer every time. So right now, when I think, why me? I think about the fact that I watched a lot of movies growing up, and I was always so immersed in character and in understanding people's motivations. My parents would bring us every weekend to a movie, and I thought that was normal. And finally, it dawned on me on the recess feel like, you don't, oh, go? You don't, oh, it's just me, okay. But understanding why people do what they do, it's been such a drive for me. Even when I was little, I was really shy. And what I've realized reflecting on this is that shyness went up against my utter fascination with humanity and lost. So eventually it was like, woo, we're just gonna ask all the questions. And that led me to, I think in a lot of ways, just approach, larger questions about society, where we are in the world, what tends to keep people from understanding each other, which really drives me in my journalism. And it made me, frankly, just obsessed with the political divide in particular, because I face it in my family, and what tools are there out there, and how can I make them easier to reach?
So would you say that curiosity is one of the most essential values to have as a journalist, and also just thinking about this world in general? Like, is that the best way to stay open-minded in conversation and just in society in general?
Yeah, absolutely. And curiosity is not just itself. It's sort of a universe of so many different kinds of emotions and qualities of how we approach each other. It's connected to empathy. It's no good without honesty. And it's connected to intellectual humility, which is where most of the academic research on this comes up, right? So questions about, do you cling to your beliefs just because they're theirs? Are you able to look outside your own perspectives every now and then? Can you welcome some friction? How long can you hold on to the discomfort of uncertainty? And sometimes that's just too hard, right? It depends on the situation. But yeah, I've really come to believe that the fact that humans are all equipped with this cognitive superpower called curiosity, this hunger for knowledge, really gets us out of a lot of stuck points. And so it can really serve us now.
I do want to talk about that you say in your book several times that you're a liberal daughter that was raised by two conservative parents. They voted for Trump twice while you voted for Clinton and Biden. How did those political differences in your upbringing influence your career and work today? Also a loaded question.
Yes. Well, in my upbringing, there were a lot of dinners over our table growing up in New Hampshire. Once I was in elementary school, middle school, this table with like red kind of grid on it and everything. And I just remember, dinner would be done and we would still be there talking about welfare in the 90s. We'd still be there talking about whatever Glenn Beck said last night, that me and my brother were really mad about, what my parents really thought was the right thing. So I got a lot of practice at home dealing with friction, right? I would maybe be in college. I went to a liberal arts college in Maine and come home just really sure of a lot of these ideas and wanting affirmation everywhere I went. But I couldn't get that at home. My parents would be like, I don't know about that. Like, what? And so we would just get into it with each other. And I don't pretend to be any star debater or anything like that. It wasn't even about winning the arguments. Sometimes we made it into that. But what I've learned is that it helped us get to know each other and understand some really interesting things about each other's personalities and what we really care about. Like my dad, for example, in a lot of ways, but particularly sometimes through our political disagreements, I've really come to understand how his love for the people closest to him is like out of this world. it's so deep and rich and it's awesome, right? And sometimes I don't see it. Sometimes I think that his disagreement is based on you don't love enough, right? And then I'm reminded, no, it's just his love is focused in a different way than mine sometimes, and I think that's pretty cool.
That's very interesting. I feel like when you hear stories about children having different political views than their parents, there's always much more clash than love, and people will stump love for politics. Do you have any advice for people that are currently going through that with their parents?
Yeah, I think my number one tip for that situation is if you find yourself wanting to ask or being confounded by the question, why don't they care about this? You know, I care about this thing for this reason. Why don't they care about this? Instead of asking that question, ask yourself, well, what do they care about more? What do they care about that is different, that they care about more, that's pushed them in a different direction on this issue? And so that's a curious question. Instead of coming into the conversation, you know, ready to judge or attack and then inviting attacks back and sort of all blows up, you're more in a place of discovery and investigation. And I really believe, and I mean, who doesn't really mean, we're deep, deep, deep mysteries. We're not puzzles where I'm like, I'm just missing a piece on Camryn's puzzle. I just got to put it. That's not how we work, right? New questions, new answers bring a whole lot of other questions, and then you doubt what you heard before, and we're all a mess of contradictions anyway. So keep plumbing and ask people what they might care about more, and recognize that we don't have all these answers at the ready, even about ourselves, right? So expecting someone else to give you a satisfying answer in 5 minutes may be a little unrealistic.
I agree with you. I feel like when people say, oh, I've got it all figured out, you know, I know all my opinions, all my beliefs. No, you don't. You just haven't quite figured it out yet. You haven't gotten there yet. Yeah. So that's very interesting. I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying. To follow up, though, reflecting back on your book, it was published last year in 2022. Reflecting on that, is there anything like statements or chapters that you don't feel the same way about today? Any changes in your thought process from back then?
I mean, I feel like if I wrote the book again, it would be really different. It would have so many more stories because I've been going around the country, all different kinds of communities, liberal, conservative, churches, schools, businesses, and afterward, all I get is more stories, confessions, struggles, you know, anecdotes. So I know that would be the case. I guess what I'll say is I would add a chapter on the relationship between trust and truth. That's kind of my current curiosity, I suppose. I think that, you know, being a journalist, I feel a deep allegiance to truth, as do we all. But we tend to skip the trust building part. And so here we are, living in some ways in what feel like different realities, right? All in our own silos. And we're just trying to smash our facts at each other and like shame each other for not accepting the facts. Like, here we are, right? But without trust, we can't engage in what we need, which is a collective search for truth. And instead, we're in a place where different sides really believe they have the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And in some cases, yeah, they might be right. But collectively, if we engage in truth, in a search for truth, we're going to get a lot more complexity, a lot more nuance, and probably the kinds of material that we need to build the society we really deserve.
I feel like, you know, how do you figure out the differences between trust and truth? Because say you're following a source for a really long time and you trust them and you trust everything they're saying, and then you find out what they're saying isn't the truth. How do you navigate that kind of emotional backlash?
That's a great question. I think the relationship with a media brand or a media voice and the trust of that and the trust that I might build with my mom are two very different things, right? Trust between people that can build as we are sort of in conversation with each other, present with each other, and we feel that we matter, right? We matter to the other person. Our dignity is acknowledged. That's one thing. The trust you're talking about with media is more like loyalty and more like a sense of reliability that's built over time. And we need to be very careful with that because we'll tell ourselves, I trust this media source because it tells me the truth. But our psychology is very hackable, right? And having been in media a long time, I've hacked y'all's psychology. I know how to do it, right? It's gotten a lot more sophisticated since then. So because our psychology is so hackable, we have to really question any media that we trust, because the incentives are to build loyalty with an audience in order to survive. And the cheapest and easiest way to do that is to affirm what your audience already believes. And it doesn't matter how educated you are. We have studies for this. Doesn't matter how educated you are. Doesn't matter how informed you are. Nobody is immune from motivated reasoning, right? So that kind of trust, we need to be really vigilant about. Constantly question our assumptions. And I think when it comes to media, give yourself some time to look at media sources that serve your opponent, right? And take a look at what language they're using and ask yourself, what are the deep down honest concerns being shared over here? And that will let you keep some doorways open in your mind that would otherwise close.
I feel like you learn more of these things through personal connections, and then you apply those personal connections to your career. So thinking back, did you have a specific moment in your upbringing with your parents when you were like, I don't think that what you're saying is true? And then you did your own research. Was there a specific moment, or did that kind of just evolve as you matured?
Oh, that's great. I remember that we had a mock election. Oh God, I'm dating myself. 1996. Because that was Ross Perot and Bill Clinton and all those guys. And I remember that was like a big moment for me, because I came home from 8th grade. I don't. Oh my gosh! Wow, I really can't remember. Anyway, whatever it was, my brain freezing. Yeah, I came home kind of thinking, Clinton, obviously Clinton, and they were saying Ross Perot, and I was like, what? And I remember being sort of more interested and looking up things about Ross Perot, really kind of honoring the idea of a third-party candidate, and something about that I really liked, and so that made me dig in even more into the actual policies and coming with much more confidence to my idea that no, Bill Clinton, right, at that point. So I remember that, and I hadn't thought about that in a while, but there's a ton of moments like that happen all the time.
I feel like every single person can absolutely relate. There's always that specific event in our childhood where we don't agree with our parents. I mean, I remember when the election where President Obama became, our president, and I was just going along with what my parents were saying. And then later on, I was like, oh, wait a second. I don't know if I agree with that anymore, And so it's just very interesting. And you talk about in your book a lot about the relationship you have with your parents and navigating those conversations. And I just think you're very mature for opening up about that.
No, but well, yeah, if we could go back in time, you all see me in those interactions with my parents, I would not seem that mature. So thank you. I see that.
Absolutely. When did you start writing your book, actually?
I started really writing it in a boring month for the world, March 2020. I actually signed my book deal the day that Wall Street crashed from the pandemic. I thought I was going to write the book, at coffee shops and, at co-working dates with friends. And instead I wrote it, when I didn't have to be my daughter's kindergarten teacher and I didn't have to kind of hold the family together, through all this isolation and everything. So in a weird way, it lent something to the process of writing the book. And then summer of 2020 was so turbulent politically and socially, and I went through a lot of, oh my gosh, wait, what am I gonna say? Forget it, I can't write this, or not now, or later, and just all of that, I think, ultimately just, helped in a weird way, I think, for me to become more sort of convinced that human connection is everything, because that was the only time of my life where humans were told credibly that it would hurt us to be together.
Yeah, that's a lot to think about, for sure. How many kids do you have?
I've got 2 kids.
2 kids. Yeah. Random question, hypothetical. Yeah. If your kids were to come to you and talk about politics, and then you realize they have very different views than you do, kind of going back to how you and your parents were, what would your reaction to that be?
Well, what's funny is it's already happened. So my son is 11, and some weeks ago, he's really proud of Mom, which is super cool. He, when the books came in, to my house and it was just the galley or whatever, some friends were over, so I was keeping very muted, like, oh, it's not about me, it's fine, it's just a box, you know. In my head, I'm like, oh my God, but it's fine, we're chill. And then my son realizes the box is here, and he manifested all the giddy energy that I was holding back. Oh my God, comes over. I ended up like just catching on my phone a little bit of that, you know, like, I love my son so much. Yeah, but some months ago, he's telling me like, Mom, you know what? I think I'm conservative. And I wasn't surprised at all. I was like, yeah, tell me more. You know, why do you think that? And we talked about some things, and it was absolutely fascinating. So he's 11, right? He thinks he's conservative. Okay. So, but my reaction was, okay, tell me more. You know, in my head, a part of me wanted to go, oh, I thought so, you know, because of this and this and this and this. But I stopped myself from telling him my narrative about who he is. Tell me more. I want to hear your narrative about who you are.
Why you?
Yeah. Yeah, just like tell me, you know, and I was super curious. Like, how does an 11-year-old get this sense about himself? Like, cool, all right. So yeah, it was a neat conversation. Given that my parents, and my parents have spoken really honestly about this. My dad has talked about how when I was in college, it seemed to him, and I think it was true, that I got even more convinced of ideals on the left, and I was a sociology major, you know, just all in on a lot of things that you know, some conservatives have more questions about. And so I would come home, and my dad apparently felt like he was losing me, you know, because like how did he generate this daughter who believed so many things that he thought were wrong, right? So he's been really honest about how that felt. It really felt like he was losing me, like he had failed somehow. My mom has felt that way too, and so we've talked about that. But given that my parents are now at the place where like we all talk as a family, this is great. You know, I have in the bio, I am the proud liberal daughter of conservative parents. And it's often the last line in my bio at talks and things, so I'm always listening, like, how does the audience react to this? And like, it's usually nervous laughter. You know, like, what does that mean? Like, proud liberal. But I'm proud of the fact that our family, even though it does get really heated, and trust me, it does. I think sometimes with this book and everything, it just seems like we're some kind of Zen masters. It's not true. But the friction, you know, has made us who we are, and I want to give that to my kids. I want to let them be who they are.
Just to wrap up, you know, you're talking to Elon students tonight at 7 p.m. I'll be there, very excited. When you found out that Elon University chose your book for our common reading, what was one of your main takeaways that students will receive? Like, what did you really hope would jump out at them and they would really think about?
I mean, it's a tough one for me to answer because I try to remember the thing that's part of my whole, you know, vibe here, which is that we can't control other people. We can't predict other people. I've had folks like read things into my book that I did not intend to put in there, but it's what they read, and I can't control that, right? No, so that said, I think that one thing that is worth bearing in mind is that you don't need to be a Zen master of, you know, this stalwart, strong curiosity in the face of complete catastrophe and chaos and things that you think are just absolutely horrible or whatever the case may be, that just taking one more step toward curiosity, which can be you're asking one more question in a conversation before jumping in with your opinion, especially if you recognize that that's who you tend to be. You're the first mover in a conversation, or you really like to talk. Can you hold back? Can you ask, tell me more, after somebody has said something? Can you demonstrate interest, and can you feel interest in who they are and how they matter, right? That can be a thing you can do. Can you read the next article you read that represents a perspective you disagree with but is popularly held? Can you read that article with more curiosity, which I would say is, you know, reading it by asking yourself what deep down honest concerns are being expressed here. Even look at the anger as data. If there's anger in there and rage, be like, what is that anger trying to protect? You know, what is it protecting? Get curious. So all of these things can build up our muscle to be curious, and they are enough. They are enough. You know, you don't need to heal all the rifts with everyone tomorrow. You don't need to solve world peace. I mean, that would be great, but like, it's going to be a while and a fairly big project, and it needs all of us, and it's cool. So yeah, the world feels like it's on fire a lot of times in a lot of situations, but small steps make a big difference.
Absolutely. Do you plan to talk about that tonight to the students?
It might come up in the Q&A. We'll see.
Are you doing a Q&A?
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. I like questions. Yeah.
Interviewer, you know? Comes with the job.
It does.
That's wonderful. I'm very excited to hear it. I know a lot of people that are going, and I know a lot of people that read the book and was just very impressed with everything that you were saying. So I think you'll be getting a lot of questions.
Great.
Is there anything you want to add as we're finishing up?
No, just, I'm enjoying walking around campus. It's more humid than I'm used to. I'm liking that. I like the columns. I like the gardens. I don't know, this seems like a pretty awesome place, and I hear nothing but great things about the students and faculty, so looking forward to meeting more of y'all.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.